Hello. Hi, everyone. And today we'll continue going over the CKAD question bank. Next, let's look at the second question, which is about scheduled tasks. Here, actually, this scheduled task is similar to what we use directly in the Linux system. Cron jobs actually are basically the same. It's just that we're using a different medium. That is, we're using our YAML files to do this. A configuration for scheduled tasks. Now, let's take a look at the requirements in this question. On the screen here, we're mainly given three things: name, image, and command. There are three requirements in total. For these three requirements, we need to strictly follow the specific version and details specified in the question. The image version, as well as the command, must be executed exactly as specified. Then below that, there are three more. Actually, there are 4 or 5 smaller requirements. So here, we just need to configure our scheduled tasks according to these requirements. That's the basic requirement for our second question. Actually, we just need to set this up in the scheduled task. The key point here is, as for the configuration content, it's actually, normally in our case, we usually deploy using a pod, right? Generally, it can only run a single container because a pod is actually the smallest unit of deployment. As for jobs and cron jobs, a job is a one-time task, whereas for this question, specifically the second question, it asks us to write a scheduled or periodic task that is a cron job. This means scheduling our jobs based on time to perform various different tasks. All right, next, let's take a look at this. Let's look at the specific solution for this question. First of all, you need to pay attention. If you want to deploy this, what must you do? When writing our YAML files, you must follow the correct format according to the required specification. Because here, actually, there will be quite a lot of indentation. You need to pay attention. There's quite a bit of indentation. So make sure to carefully check the position of each indent. If you get the indentation wrong, it can cause errors in the file or when running it. All right, so next, let's take a closer look at how to actually write this cron job YAML file. First, the first step is to install and connect to the corresponding node. Then after that, we can officially start editing this file. So for this file, first, as for the name, you can just follow the requirements given in the question when naming it. If the question doesn't specify a file name, you can actually name it whatever you like. Generally, the file name is not specified in most cases, or if there is a requirement, it's usually for an already existing file. If there isn't a file, generally, for example, like in this question, we can specify it ourselves. For example, for our cron job, we can just write something like -1 and then add VML after it. That's actually enough. Just keep it simple. Next, we'll start writing the specific content. All right, so next, let's go ahead and write this out as we normally would. For the specific situation, first, let's write our version. APR version, and after that is ours. Here, both our type and version are related to our lighting. In terms of collaboration, whether it's the type or the version, we always use the same thing. We always use the version of the ground job. Here, first of all, for the type, what should we pay attention to? Pay attention to case sensitivity. Of course, actually, for this part, this section and the content we're about to write, most of it, in terms of the template, you can just go to our official website, to the official documentation, and copy it. That's totally fine. However, so what kind of situation am I talking about? If, for example, when the network isn't very good, right? When the connection is slow or laggy, what I'm mainly referring to here is during the exam. So in this case, actually, or it's also possible that you might have trouble finding the official documentation, or you just can't find it at all. This does happen. In these situations, it's actually best if you can just memorize all the content. For this question, if you try to memorize everything, it's true that there's quite a lot of content, but if you can remember it all, it's actually better than having to look up the documentation for every single question. So here, our best recommendation is for everyone to memorize it first. Also, when it comes to the questions, there's actually a time constraint, right? There's a time issue. The time limit in the question is actually 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes, once every 5 minutes. So here we use new-5, and if there are no other specific requirements, you can just write new as you. All right, that's the first time requirement. Now, at this point, let's move on to writing our second point in our discussion. As for the second requirement, there's another one in the prompt, which is in this part, for the second point, actually, there aren't any specific requirements in the question. So if there are no requirements, you can just write it as you normally would. This way is fine. Here, for our resource management strategy, we just need to specify that when we succeed, what do we keep? We keep 2. For example, successful. Here we write successful, and job history refers to our successful run. For jobs, we keep 2 successful ones, and for failures, we keep 4. So keep 2 successful and 4 failed jobs. Here, when we write about the successful history, it basically means keeping the historical record. So here, what we actually write is that the number of successful history records is 2, and the number of failed history records is 4. One is a successful job, and the other is a failed job. As for the image, we add our limit here. Then, regarding the specific content inside the job, earlier we actually specified a time-related setting outside, right? That is running once every 5 minutes. So what exactly does this job need to do? We actually need to write that in the job template. In this template, the things we can define. First of all, active. First of all, in our assignment, there's a requirement. What is it? It's about it should be called control over the execution time. That is starting the timer from when the pod launches and then forcibly terminating it after 8 seconds, regardless of whether the task has completed successfully or not. So in this case, our main task is actually to prevent what? To prevent the task from running for too long, right? Basically, it's about putting a limit on the execution time of our task, restricting how long it can run. So here, when we write this task, normally we'll just set the execution time to 8 seconds. As for these 8 seconds, to be precise, it's not actually a requirement from the problem statement, right? It's not that the problem specifically asks for this. It's just that after our own testing, we found that in this cron job, 8 seconds of runtime is sufficient. Any longer than that doesn't really make sense. And as for 1800, that actually meets the requirements we've set. All right, now let's write another container, something related to containers. This part is actually pretty straightforward. We've done this many times before, right? We've written this many times already. Here, you just need to write the container information according to the requirements of the problem. For example, the name here, right? As for the name, what we have here is you don't need to memorize things like names or types by rote, like the image type, for example. So actually, all of these are considered variable parameters. They're all variable parameters, so there's no point in memorizing them. Even if you copy from the official documentation after copying, what should you mainly change? It's actually just these parts. Things like names, because in the official documentation, these are fixed. They're always the same. But in each exercise or problem, the requirements for things like names might be different. It's basically impossible to just follow the official documentation exactly, right? Otherwise, everyone could just copy it, finish one problem, copy again, and be done with another one. That would be way too easy. So it's definitely based on the official documentation. But there will always be some modifications made on top of what's on the official site. And then the last part is our command. This command, actually, you just follow what's shown in the diagram. You can just take the command from there and use it. So that's basically the main solution to this problem, the main approach. As for this command, you can just write it directly in the problem. That's really all there is to it here. For this problem or this command, what exactly are we being asked to do? Actually, it doesn't really have much to do with our exam. It's basically just about calculating this, just doing this calculation. Calculating the first 2000 decimal places of pi, the computation time is about 8 seconds more or less. So it basically takes around 8 seconds to finish, so there's no need for more time. This is based on previous tests. According to those tests, calculating pi to this precision takes about 8 seconds, roughly 8 seconds. The computing power is sufficient to complete the task, no more time is needed. Next, let's list out the method for calculating pi as mentioned in the problem. Just write it out, and there's not much else to pay attention to. That covers the main content of our second question. But there's a lot of content here, right? We've written a lot of words, and it's easy to make mistakes. There's just so much information, so it's easy to get things wrong. So first of all, everyone should... What can you do first? You can just execute all this content once, write everything out, and then execute it directly. Executing it actually helps us check for mistakes. Running it is essentially a way to check your work. Another point is After you finish writing the commands, there's something else we need to add here. Pay attention to the restart policy. Who should it align with? It should align with it should be aligned with the container's information. Make sure the information matches the container. All right, let's write this part out here. So for this part, it's basically set to never restart this one. Hold on, because here, once our calculation EC is done, it's finished. It only runs once. Now let's take a look at the final result here. Then here, let's go ahead and save it. After saving, we'll begin to start running it. Let's execute our command and see if the result here is normal as expected. I'll use the command with the apply option, then add the F flag, and finally specify our file. Let's write the name of the file we created and then execute it. It says here that maybe there's an error in our field. Let's take a look at what's wrong there. Also, there's the full job. Let me check if there's an issue with the words successful and failed. Let's take a look. Success, successful job. And then there's the history limit. One is fail and one is success, right? Let's check here. So the issue with the words is that one is 2, right? 1 is 2 and 1 is 4. Open successful. After job is history. Limit. This is our field. For the field here, let me see. Failed. Job history. Limit is 4. Here, we're talking about after job. Right here, after shop. We missed an is here, so please pay attention to this spot. At this position, okay, so what error does it report in October? It's these two, right? No, actually, it can't recognize these two parameters. So here, we just need to modify them and run it again. All right, after it's done running, that's basically it. It's pretty much finished. To check, we simply use the phrase Uber control and then follow it up by stating our ground job, just as we normally would. Yeah, let's take a look, right? 5 minutes, and as for the specific details, well, you'll need to open it up and check inside. The timing here is definitely correct, right? Next, we can use our create command to manually trigger it. Let's manually trigger this job. Because there's an issue here, which is that it needs a time window, right? If you want to verify it immediately here, we don't have this. If you don't use a command, you actually have to wait for a while, right? You need to wait for some time. So here we can just use a command to verify it directly. That is by using our kubectl create followed by our job and then our test. And after that is the one we just from job -ppi. Okay, it was created successfully here, right? Created successfully. Then if you want to see specific information, you can use get jobs to check. But whether it succeeds or not, or whether it's completed, doesn't really matter. As long as you create it properly, that's enough. As long as there are no issues with these commands during your creation process, and everyone should also make sure to check whether the contents of your file are correct. Yeah, as long as everything is normal. Here, as long as things are normal and you can see this information, then there's really no problem. Whether it succeeds or fails isn't important here, actually. Actually, as mentioned in the program, whether it succeeds or not really isn't important. As long as it can run normally, that's fine. This is our second question. If your creation syntax is correct, everything else is basically fine. There's really nothing to worry about. So this is our final result, our final outcome. Whether it succeeds or fails really doesn't matter. So this is basically our situation here. This is the scenario for our second question. And this is our standard solution for the second question. For this problem, everyone should pay attention. When you're practicing, it really doesn't matter whether you succeed or fail. It's all the same. Success or failure doesn't matter. Yeah, this question is really just like that. The main point here is that, as hinted, whether the job completes or fails isn't really important. This is also mentioned in the problem statement. So this is our second question. What should we mainly pay attention to? The key thing is to make sure our timing is correct. The timing must be accurate. And also, make sure it never restarts and that it terminates after 8 seconds. Because of these requirements, if it fails the first time, it actually won't restart again. So if it fails the first time, it will just be marked as failed. That's normal. If it succeeds the first time, it will be marked as complete. That's how it works. As for the content inside, just make sure the command is written correctly. Just follow the requirements in the problem statement and write it as specified. All right, that wraps up our second question. If you need the complete question bank, you can leave a comment below and get the most reliable question bank at the best price. That's all for today, everyone. Bye-bye.